Thank you, Paul, for that introduction. As Paul said, my name is Christian Klein. I'm Executive Vice President of the Aeronautical Repair Station Association. I want to start by just providing a little bit of context about ARSA so you have a little bit better idea of who I am and what it is we do. How many, if I can just get a show of hands, how many of you are ARSA members in this room? Okay, so we got a handful, but many aren't, and so this is a good opportunity to provide a bit of an introduction. ARSA is an international trade association that is based in Washington, D.C., and we represent the interests of the aviation, the global aviation maintenance industry. Our members, the primary criterion for being a member of ARSA is to have a Part 145 certificate, whether from the FAA or from some other civil aviation authority. There are four primary areas of focus that we have at ARSA. One of them is regulatory advocacy, and that's kind of where ARSA got its start and kind of made its name. That is to say, we work with the FAA, we work with the European Aviation Safety Agency, other CAAs around the world to try to craft good regulatory policy that, in the best case scenario is efficient and reflects business realities. And then we work with our members to help them understand the regulations and comply with the regulations. So we do a lot of education, training, and provide a lot of regulatory compliance resources. We also, recognizing that a lot of what happens at the FAA and what happens at civil aviation authorities kind of flows downhill from legislative bodies, we're also very involved politically. And we have a very aggressive lobbying effort up on Capitol Hill. And in fact, I am one of those evil lobbyists that you guys hear so much about. But I'm your evil lobbyist, so got that going for you, right? But ARSA does a lot of work up on Capitol Hill. We work with the committees that have jurisdiction over the FAA to try to guide the oversight of the agency. We're always on the lookout for hostile legislation that would threaten to raise your costs of doing business, intrude on your markets, et cetera. We also do a lot of public relations work for the industry, recognizing that the public relations, the media, the way the media is covering the industry, public perspectives on the industry shape policy, both regulatory policy and legislative policy. We do a lot of work, outreach to reporters, producing media materials to help the media better understand this industry, its economic impact, et cetera. And finally, workforce development. We know that the skilled technical worker challenge is the biggest strategic threat facing this industry. And so ARSA has integrated workforce development, skilled workforce development throughout its DNA, and we're working it on the regulatory front, working it on the legislative front, public relations, et cetera, and try to attract the next generation of skilled technical workers to this industry. We also provide a lot of business solutions. We have preferred provider relationships with a number of companies that are designed to help reduce your costs of doing business, and of course component control is a very important one of our partners. I am the ARSA's Executive Vice President, and I am also a partner in the law firm of Obadall, Filler, McLeod & Klein, which runs ARSA. My law partner, Sarah McLeod, started ARSA about 30 years ago. So we have a law firm that, in addition to running associations and running association government affairs programs and doing strategic communications, also does regulatory compliance assistance for individual aviation clients. So whether you're trying to get ahead of a regulatory compliance issue or you've been dinged by the FAA, we are a law firm that is there to help. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about here today, state of MRO, some of the risks and opportunities we see facing the aviation maintenance industry, why it's important for you to be engaging, then some engagement best practices, and finally some of the tools that we provide to support your effective engagement. Let's start by talking a little bit about the state of MRO. I think it is fair to say that the state of our industry is very strong. We have a relationship with a company called CAVOC. It's an Oliver Wyman company that provides ARSA with economic data about the industry, which we use for our advocacy and our media outreach, et cetera. But the people at CAVOC tell us that in 2015, the global air transport MRO is expected to be about $67 billion. So we are a $67 billion global industry. We are on track for 4.1% growth over the next decade, and that's based on estimates of 5% annual growth in passenger traffic plus increased international fleet investment. So by 2025, we are looking at being a $100 billion global industry. We employ 290,000 Americans in aviation maintenance and parts, manufacturing, and distribution. And we are significant contributors to what is the safest period in the history of civil aviation. So I think all of you can be very, very proud to be a part of this industry, which is a thriving, growing industry that provides a critical economic and safety function for the economy. So that's the good news. The bad news is that there are risks on the horizon. I mentioned earlier the technician shortage. Now, this is often cited by our members as the most significant strategic threat facing this industry. You saw those growth numbers I gave you. We're going to be a $100 billion global industry in 10 years. So the question is, where are the people going to come from to support that growing industry? And we have asked this question to our members. 86% of our members say that they have had trouble in the last 2 years finding skilled technical workers. We've seen statistics from the association that represents Part 147 aviation technical schools that shows that about a quarter of the people who are coming out of A&P schools are going into other industries, whether you're talking about energy or amusement parks or heavy construction equipment or automotive. They're taking their skills elsewhere and they're not staying in this industry. So we see this technician shortage as a major strategic threat. Overregulation is also often cited by our members as a significant strategic problem. And we're talking about both overregulation by the FAA and inconsistent enforcement by our own regulatory agencies, and then overlapping regulation, whether you're complying with the FAA and then having to comply with the EASA or whatever CAA certificates you might have. So overlapping regulation, micromanagement by Congress, and we see this. We are entering a reauthorization cycle. Reauthorization every few years, in this case every 3 or 4 years, Congress passes an authorization bill for the FAA, and the authorization bill is effectively a funding blueprint in which Congress says, here's how much money you have for the next 3 or 4 years to do your job, here's how it's going to be allocated up, here's what we want your priorities to be. But as part of that FAA reauthorization process, we also frequently see new legislative mandates, new laws, aviation-related laws, and new regulatory mandates imposed on the industry, some of which in the past have been quite burdensome and had significant impacts on our members' costs of doing business in markets. So we are entering a reauthorization cycle. The current FAA authorization law expires at the end of September, and we are going to see a flurry of activity between now and the end of the year on aviation policy on Capitol Hill. And so we are continuing to build up the visibility of this industry on Capitol Hill and constantly on the lookout for what we perceive to be hostile legislation. Part of that hostility is related to the hostility to free trade. We have, this is an inherently global industry. The United States has a positive balance of trade in aviation maintenance services, something we can be very, very proud of. We have a number of our members, obviously, that have EASA approval and certificates from other civil aviation authorities. And the concern is that we might see something come through the FAA reauthorization process that would limit the use of foreign repair stations or somehow try to revoke certificates from foreign repair stations. That would be a bad thing because it would almost certainly lead to retaliation against U.S. companies by foreign governments and undermine free trade in aviation maintenance services, which has been such a great thing for this industry. And then we see, this is a little bit more peripheral, but it is significant. Those are threats to business aviation. Business aviation has gotten kind of a bad name, and we are perennially seeing on Capitol Hill and from the administration efforts to, kind of attack business aviation around the edges by doing things with depreciation schedules for business aircraft and things like that. So we do perceive that as another potential threat to this industry. There are also opportunities, though. It's not all bad news. There is an opportunity to address the technician shortage. Both at the federal level through things like the Perkins Act reauthorization, which is likely to take place during this Congress, through regulatory work where we're working with the FAA to try to make some adjustments to Part 147 to give more flexibility to the schools that are training aviation technicians. Certainly from a public relations standpoint, an engagement standpoint, helping people learn more about this industry, see more engagement from our members at the local level with local technical schools. Improving the quality and efficiency of regulatory oversight. One of the realities right now in Washington, D.C. is that federal agencies are having to learn how to do more with less. And again, you see what we're talking about, a growing industry, a $100 billion global industry over the next decade. you're not going to see massive increases in the budgets for federal regulatory agencies. So the regulators are going to have to figure out how to be more efficient in what they do. And we can obviously help guide that conversation about how to enhance efficiency, whether it's going to be, moving towards more partnerships, more bilateral aviation safety agreements with other countries, so that there is there's cooperation and oversight, some sort of world aviation regulations system, so we are not complying with a patchwork of regulations from all over the world, but a single set of aviation regulations. All these are opportunities as the industry grows in an environment where the federal government's resources are not growing. And finally, a tax code that encourages investment. Again, this goes back to the question, it's not just a question of protecting business aviation and preventing changes to the tax laws that are hostile to business aviation, but there are also opportunities to do things in the context of tax reform and other tax legislation to encourage more capital investment, not just in aircraft, but also in the technologies that are going to help make you guys more efficient and more effective. Now, what do all these things that I've talked about in common, all the risks and opportunities have in common? The commonality here is that every single one of those can be affected by industry engagement. If individuals in this industry engage in the political process, in their communities, if we engage collectively, we can have a difference on all these strategic threats and opportunities facing our industry. The reality is that decisions that are made on Capitol Hill, at the regulatory agencies, in your state capitals and your town halls affect your markets. They affect your market conditions, demand for your product, who you can do business with. And they affect your cost of doing business, whether we're talking about your taxes, your regulatory compliance costs, your labor costs. The reality is you can make a difference. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen time and time and again that when industry organizations and individual business leaders step up, they can have a significant influence on the process at every level of government. And making an impact is easier than you think. So let's talk a little bit about what I consider to be engagement best practices. The first thing is to figure out, I teach public relations at the University of Virginia. One of the foundational things we talk about is what is public relations. Public relations is facilitating communication between an organization and the publics on whose behavior the success of the organization depends. So the first thing you've got to ask yourself is whose behavior matters for your company to be successful? Certainly your customers. We'll put that aside. That's more of a marketing function. But whose behavior affects the success of your company? Certainly it is your workforce, prospective workers. It's government. It's the people making decisions. And you could go through the list of all the various entities out there, sets of individuals that have an impact on the success of your company, whose behavior affects the company. So the first thing you want to do is identify who those most important publics are and start looking at opportunities to develop strong relationships with those publics. And let's start by saying that your publics are going to be your member of Congress, maybe your local, whether you have a local town council or county commissioner, people who are in a position to affect the success of your business. Communicating regularly with government is absolutely critical, because one of the challenges we've had in this industry is that people don't know we exist. People, when they think about aviation, they think about airlines, they think about manufacturers. They don't think about the aviation maintenance industry. And so we have tried to be much more aggressive in raising the visibility, getting out from behind the curtains, as it were, and saying we're here and we are an important economic factor in this country, and the decisions that they're making on Capitol Hill affect us, and you have to know how your decisions are affecting our members. And so we are encouraging our members to communicate regularly with government and to start building those relationships with their elected officials. One of the best ways to do that is by inviting officials to visit your company. And yes, I mean, members of Congress, bringing in members of Congress is great. They love the opportunity when they're back in their state or district to come in, go to a local company, walk around, see what actually makes the economy tick, shake hands. And you might be very surprised. We've had this happen time and time again, that members of Congress who've been on the other side of issues from ARSA we've reached out, offered the opportunity for them to go to visit one of our member facilities. They didn't even know the member facility was there. They didn't even know they had repair stations in their district. They didn't know that their district had had anything to do with the aviation industry. But all of a sudden they see 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 employees whose livelihoods are affected by the decisions they're making on Capitol Hill. And that has changed. We've seen relationships with members of Congress change because our members have stepped up and engaged and invited their members of Congress in. But it's not just members of Congress. It can also be members of your state government, your state elected representatives, state senators, your local county council people, could be school guidance counselors. Going back to this workforce issue, we've got to do a better job of reaching out to our schools and helping them understand what this industry does, and that you've got a growing industry that has opportunities for great long careers. So bringing people in to see your company and see what it is you do, helping to elect candidates who agree with you. This is the campaign finance side of things. And it is absolutely critical that we as an industry do a better job of helping to elect candidates who understand the economic needs of this industry and are committed to our economic health. Our ARSA has a political action committee, and so we do make contributions to members of Congress. What you're doing is, again, you're helping to elect people who agree with you on the issues. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've never been, despite what you may see on House of Cards or whatever political television show you're watching, I've never been in a position where a member of Congress has said to me, hey, I will do this if you give me a campaign contribution. In my Washington, D.C., that doesn't happen. But the reality is you are helping to elect people who see the issues the same way you do, whether you're talking about economic issues, trade issues, whatever it is, or the role of the federal government in regulation. And there are all sorts of great opportunities for you to do this, to seek out your local candidates and to go and write $25, $50 personal check and get to know them a little bit and become more visible with those elected officials. Engaging with media is also critical, and there are a couple of major ways to do this. Obviously, the first is to get in the habit of issuing press releases when something important happens at your company. When you expand your facility, when you make the decision you're going to significantly add to your staff. When you have a member of Congress come to visit, we like to help work with our members to issue press releases. The other thing is sending letters to the editor about issues that matter to this industry and matter to your company. The reason this is so important is that members of Congress and your elected officials, your state elected officials, whoever they are, read the local papers. And I know this because I have worked on Capitol Hill. I'm up there all the time. We know that on a daily basis, congressional officers are sweeping the back home newspapers and looking for stories about federal issues that that their constituents back home care about. And so we do encourage our members to send in letters to the editor of local papers to talk about our industry issues. And also because that helps to shape the reporting and helps elevate the visibility of your companies in this industry and helps remind the local media that, hey, there's an aviation industry here, which they may or may not have known about. Engaging with local schools is another, obviously also critical, especially if we're going to be addressing this workforce challenge. We have to get to people earlier. We have to let them know that this industry is out here and that there are opportunities here. And obviously, you can, whether you're talking about inviting elementary school groups in, or high school groups, or volunteering and serving on the board of a local community college, participating in job fairs, donating equipment. One of the things we hear from the aviation, whatever technical school you're talking about, is they have challenges getting a hold of the newest technology. And so our members complain that the people being produced by the schools don't have modern skills. At the same time, the schools don't have the modern technology they need to do the training. So consider ways to engage with your local schools to help address the skilled worker shortage. Also, maximize the return on investment, of your investment in your trade association. So some of you are members of ARSA, that's great. Maybe some of you will join, that's great too. You're probably members of other trade associations that can provide resources to help you do the types of things that I've been talking about here. So ARSA is standing by to help our members do things like identify your member of Congress, invite your member of Congress to your facility, help hone your message, give you the data you need to feel like you're communicating effectively, help you build the bridges to your local technical schools. I mean, that's why our association exists, to be an advocate for the aviation maintenance industry. But obviously we need to hear from our members, and our members need to step up and get personally engaged themselves. And don't take the status quo for granted. Don't believe that just because the legislation is moving on Capitol Hill, there's nothing you can do about it. Don't believe that just because the FAA is interpreting a rule one way or another, that's the way it's got to be. And because I have seen time and time again, when people bring us issues, when people step up and get engaged, we really can make a difference individually and collectively. So let's walk through some of the you want to call them truisms or cliches about advocacy. The first is this idea that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. What does that mean? I can tell you there are literally tens of thousands of economic interests competing in the political process in Washington, D.C. Some of you guys may remember from 7th or 8th grade reading The Federalist, number 10. That was kind of the theory. In a free economy, basically you're going to have economic units as the source of political conflict, or as the unit of political conflict. Economic interest will be the unit of political conflict. You see that every single day in Washington, D.C. If you ask me what I do, I'm the Federalist number 10 in action. I represent economic sectors in the political process. And you have thousands of economic interests competing in Washington, D.C. for limited resources, limited focus from lawmakers, limited focus from regulators. And so it's important that we step up and get engaged, because your competitors are. Interests that are hostile to this industry are engaged in Washington, D.C. We've got to be there too. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, or if you're not at the table, you're on the table. The notion that if we don't hang together, we shall surely hang apart. Benjamin Franklin said that. What that means is that there are 535 members of the House and Senate, and ARSA has a staff of about 15, and we have 2 lobbyists with ARSA. So guess how hard it is for Daniel Fisher and myself to cover all 535 congressional offices and all the committees. Obviously, we can't do that by ourselves. So we need to work with our members to expand our outreach, engage more effectively with these congressional offices, and it also means we've got to work in coalitions. So we work very closely with other industry organizations that have similar interests, and we work collectively. I mean, if you think of D.C., it's a big machine, and our job as lobbyists is to try to get as many of the cogs in Washington, D.C. Moving in one direction, and once you get that done, sometimes you can actually make good things happen in the nation's capital. But it takes, again, a collective engagement because there's so many little gears and cogs in the machine. All politics are local. You know, the reality is every member of Congress wants to get reelected. That's their overriding priority. So to the extent that you can tie the issues that they're looking at up on Capitol Hill back to the state or district, that's how you can be an effective advocate. And so one of the things we emphasize is when our members either come to Washington, D.C. to participate in our fly-in, or they're communicating about an issue, we make sure that they say, you know, here's where our company is based, here's where we have other facilities, here's how many employees we have, here's what we pay in taxes. So members get a true sense, members of Congress get a true sense of what this industry's contribution to the economy in their state or district really is. Very important to tie it to back home and to build those relationships back home. And again, get members of Congress to your facilities, et cetera, so they can see not these abstract political issues that we're working on in Washington, D.C., but they actually will understand how those issues affect them at the local level. Remember that the policy process is a marathon, not a sprint. It's rare that things in Washington, D.C. happen overnight. That's where it's not a question of just sending one email to a congressional office and saying, I'm concerned about this particular provision in the FAA reauthorization. It's about consistent engagement, building relationships, and recognizing that things take time. And we've been, in addition to working on FAA issues, we work on other transportation policy issues. We've been working on a highway bill for about 7 years now. And again, you've just got to stay focused and stay positive and stay engaged, because these things can take time. And finally, make a friend before you need one. You've got to build these relationships early. And even if nothing I've said has resonated with you, maybe you don't care about the workforce thing, you don't care about any of these legislative policy things, you might at some point. And so you should consider taking the opportunity to reach out to a congressional office and introduce yourself and your company. Take the opportunity to invite a member of Congress to visit your facility this summer just because you wanted to see what you guys do. Because you don't know what the future holds from a policy standpoint, whether we're going to see hostile labor policy, hostile aviation policy, regulatory policy, tax policy, you name it. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know that if we build relationships now and we raise the visibility of this industry now, we will be more effective collectively and individually going forward. So what I want to talk about now, or as we conclude here, are some of the tools that ARSA has provided for the industry to help make you guys effective advocates for this industry. The first is a website called avmro.arsa.org, avmro.arsa.org. This is, I think of this as the public relations site for the aviation maintenance industry. Its intended audience are reporters, people who are interested potentially in jobs in the industry, members of Congress, congressional staffers, anyone who's kind of one of these interests or publics we're trying to affect who might want more information about the industry. We've got economic data, we've got just kind of general overview of the industry, we've got information on there about the different types of jobs, et cetera. One of the most important things on the website is our economic data. And as I mentioned, we have this relationship with CAVOC. What they do on an annual basis is go through and quantify the economic impact of this industry in every state. So when we go to Capitol Hill, we can say to a member of Congress, this isn't just a, $64 billion global industry. Here is the impact it has in your state. Here's how many people we employ, or our industry employs in your state. Very significant. And that's helpful for you guys. Let's say you're having some dignitary into your facility. It helps you put yourself in a broader context. Yes, you may have 15 or 20 or 50 employees. But in the entire state, there may be, in California, I think there are 34,000 people working in the aviation maintenance industry. So you can kind of put yourself in the broader context of the state economy. Very useful data there. arsaaction.org, this is our grassroots website. This is what you use to communicate with Capitol Hill. There's information on here about our hot legislative issues and pre-crafted messages you can use to actually communicate with Congress. This is where you can get contact information for your members of Congress. We have an annual legislative day. Next one is happening March 16th in 2016. This is where people from the maintenance industry come to Washington, D.C. for our symposium, go to Capitol Hill, and we provide briefings to make sure people fully understand the issues. And then we cut you loose on Capitol Hill. You do individual meetings. We help you set up meetings with your members of Congress. It's one of those things that can seem scary and intimidating and everything else at first if you've never done it before, but the feedback we get back from our members is universally positive, that we make it as easy as possible. And the reality is your members of Congress want to hear from you. They want to know what issues you're concerned about, and things like the legislative day are a great way to come to D.C. and engage collectively. We also have various legislative and regulatory intelligence streams, so you can find out what's happening on Capitol Hill or find out what's happening at the FAA on the issues that affect you. And so you can subscribe to things like the ARSA hotline. We have a weekly blast that goes out with important news. And what I want to reinforce is that ARSA is standing by to provide support for our members in all these areas. That we have great people. We have regulatory experts who can answer your regulatory questions and help with regulatory advocacy issues, helping to resolve problems with the FAA. We have legislative people who can help you identify your member of Congress. We've got media people who can help you find your local paper and find the contact person you should be sending your letters to the editor or press releases to. So what I want to talk about in conclusion here is one of the most important tools we think we've ever created to support engagement in this industry. And it's a new PBS documentary called You Can't Fly Without Us. This is a project that we had worked on basically throughout 2014. We were approached by a company called Leading Edge, Florida-based company, that does interstitial documentary programming for public television. Basically, interstitial means this is the thing that would run between Downton Abbey and Sherlock, or between Sesame Street and Electric Company, and those little units of time that they have on public television stations because they don't have commercials. So it's we were approached by Leading Edge. Their series is fairly well known. It's actually, when you see it on PBS, on TV, it's actually introduced by a guy named Jimmy Johnson, who may be familiar. I'm not a big sports guy, but he's a former Miami Dolphins and University of Miami and Dallas Cowboy football coach, and now he's an ESPN sportscaster. So kind of, he's the celebrity who introduces these little units. So we worked with this company, Leading Edge, to develop this video that we saw serving multiple public relations functions. Yes, it's great. We're getting our message in front of an educated PBS audience. That's a good thing. More people are learning about this industry. But what we were trying to do with this is create a tool that our members would use and take far and wide, and use it for workforce development, use it for public relations, et cetera. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you the video, and afterwards we'll kind of wrap up here. But I did want to make sure you guys actually saw this, and it is, as I said, it's about 7 minutes long. So let's see, Aaron, should I just control it from up here? Just run it off the machine? Let's do that and see what happens.
It's an industry that transports more than 3 million people a day. It connects cultures and is integral to global commerce. It brings jobs to countless people across the world. However, as important as air travel is, few realize the significance and complexity of aircraft maintenance. Maintenance is the least known or understood part of the aviation industry, but planes can't fly without it.
The modern transport airplane today, it's really a very sophisticated machine. We're dealing with a lot of different technologies that are deployed in the airplane itself, and it's that kind of brings the whole safety, reliability, comfort, and operational performance that we enjoy today as a traveling public.
One thing that many people don't know is that airlines contract much of their maintenance to highly specialized companies that do nothing but maintain, repair, and overhaul aircraft and parts. That's why the aviation maintenance industry is known as MRO. While there are a number of companies that specialize in heavy maintenance, working on the whole aircraft in a big hangar, most work takes place off the aircraft at highly specialized facilities that work on specific parts or components like landing gear, avionics, auxiliary motor units, even seatbelts.
Airlines can't afford to have every single piece of equipment being maintained by themselves. So what they do is go to professional maintenance operations that enable them to get the best maintenance at the best price with reliability and safety at the utmost.
The airline industry it's two things. It's a complex industry, as in a high-tech industry. In order to be able to really supply this industry, you do need specialties. You need specialists in different areas. And in the maintenance side, it means having the best at what they do.
Because highly specialized repair stations get a better return on their investment in training, tools, and technology, they help airlines reduce maintenance costs while ensuring a high level of safety. In fact, there's been a direct correlation between the use of contract maintenance by airlines in recent decades and a dramatic drop in accidents. One of the reasons for the industry's outstanding safety record is that an infrastructure exists to make sure repair stations get the job done right.
Aviation is definitely one of the most regulated and looked at, if you will, audited industries, frankly, that I can think of. And you want this. It is because there is so much oversight, so much professionalism, so many skilled, experienced people, from maintainers to pilots to controllers. All of them part of a team that in fact give us the greatest safety record in modal transportation.
The aviation maintenance industry isn't just critical to safety, it's also critical to the economy. There are more than 4,000 FAA certificated maintenance facilities throughout the United States that together employ close to 200,000 people. In fact, there are 4 times more people working for FAA certificated repair stations in the United States than there are mechanics working for airlines. Most of these repair stations are smaller, family-owned companies. This makes maintenance a huge part of the world economy. There are more than 4,700 aircraft repair facilities worldwide, employing roughly 473,000 people.
Small businesses play a huge role in the repair and maintenance and repair and overhaul of aviation worldwide. There's nearly 5,000 businesses that have certificated repair stations. The majority of those employ less than 50 people. So small business is really at the heart of the industry.
It's advancing quickly. It's grown steadily over the last 50 years. And the need for it and the demand for it is only growing around the world as the middle class grows in other parts of the world. So it's vital from that standpoint.
The global aviation maintenance market is expected to grow 50% over the next decade, from $57.7 billion in 2014 to $86.6 billion in 2024. The growth means opportunities for people looking for an exciting career, not just a job. Repair stations are hungry for workers who want to be a part of a dynamic, growing global industry.
When I was in high school, as a regular high school student, you're always thinking about, what you're going to do next or whatever. But I was always thinking about 5 years from now. Where do I see myself 5 years from now?
This was going to be a temporary job, actually. I was applying for a university in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for pilots. And once I saw this and I found out that this is what I wanted to do, no more doubts in my mind what I wanted to do.
Well, I'm an avionics technician. We run anything that is electronics from the airplane. My job is pretty much removing and replacing components, troubleshooting, finding out, learning a system and running through the whole thing, making sure that the whole system works, that there's no problems.
ARSA is the voice of the global aviation maintenance industry. Trade associations like ARSA provide a voice for the industry, with regulators, lawmakers, media, current and potential members of the workforce, and the flying public.
if the participants in an industry aren't engaged in an association or some other kind of collective advocacy vehicle, there are a number of risks. I mean, number one, obviously, risk bad policy. The fact is that in Washington, D.C., if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And so there's a risk that Congress is going to impose new legal mandates. They're going to do things that drive up your cost of doing business, that eat into your markets, bad regulations that unnecessarily drive up your cost of doing business. I'm reminded of the words of Ben Franklin. We have to hang together or we're surely going to hang apart. And that is very true when it comes to trade associations. The reality is, if you're not an ARSA member, it means that your voice is not part of our advocacy. It means that your perspectives and our policy making isn't taken into account. It also means that you're not getting the benefit of the services that ARSA provides, the things we do to try to help reduce our members' costs of doing business, to help them be more efficient and be more effective competitors in the marketplace. All right, so what do you guys think? Good? Miami was hot. We filmed it all on one day in Miami in June, and it was somewhat unpleasant down there, but we had a good time with it. Let's see here, once we're going to slideshow and current slide. All right, so bottom line is we made this video for you guys, right? This is a video we made for the industry to be used by the industry. So, right, you can't fly without us is the title of the video, but it's not going to be successful unless you guys take it and run with it. We're kind of throwing you guys the ball here. So what we need you to do is take this video back with you. It's posted on that avmro.arsa.org website. It's also on YouTube. All you have to do is search for ARSA video, and it's the thing that keeps coming up. Take it back and give it to your HR people. I think, as far as I'm concerned, it's the kind of thing that until there's something better than this, every person coming into the industry, every person being hired by a repair station should see this video, because one of the things we have to do is inculcate this notion that you're part of this great global industry that's making these enormous contributions to aviation safety and helping the world economy be what it is. You're not just some person with a job. You're part of this great industry, and I think that video helps tell that story. Consider hosting a lunch, or at whatever after hours, and showing it to your current employees to help remind them what they're a part of. We're encouraging our members to link it on their company websites, maybe on your recruitment page. Consider tweeting it out or posting it to your Facebook followers. Also, we appreciate it if we're encouraging people to go to the YouTube page. And obviously views are important on YouTube. I think we're up to 10,000 views or something like that. But so not as many as yesterday's Kardashian video or whatever. But we think that this is more important. So we would encourage you to go to the YouTube page and view it and like it and even comment on it, because one of the cool things we're seeing is people are going on and making comments about how great it is to be part of this industry, which I thought was really cool. So that's good. Keep it queued up and show it to company visitors. We think it's a great way, as I said, to help put our individual member companies into a broader context when you have people come in, whether it's local government officials or school groups or whatever. And then there is that using it at job fairs. We really looked at this as a very important workforce development tool. This is the kind of thing you should be showing guidance counselors and showing parents and other people who help that decision-making process about whether people go into this industry or not. So as I said, take the ball, run with it, and we hope you'll make use of this video that we put so much time and energy into creating. Again, it's at avmro.arsa.org. And finally, the bottom line, hopefully I've helped to provide some perspective on how your bottom line is at stake, whether you're talking about these policy issues, the workforce issues, how they affect your markets and your cost of doing business and the health of this industry. Your engagement, both individually and as part of a greater whole, whether it's ARSA or some other trade association, really can make a difference. And it's up to all of the people in this room to help us continue to build a positive image of MRO and help us keep the state of MRO very, very strong. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Really appreciate it. And I think, Paul, do we have a couple minutes for questions? I'd be happy to take questions if anybody has any. Ideally, questions I can actually answer. So.
Thank you. Hi, Al Landolfi with Willis Aero. I was wondering, do you have any affiliation with Airlines for America?
We work with them. There's no formal legal affiliation, but they are the trade association that represents the airlines in as much as we are the trade association that represents the maintenance industry. So we do work very, very closely with their lobbyists. Often our interests are aligned. So the short answer is yes, we work with them very closely, but there's no formal affiliation with them.
Okay. And just one other is, do you participate in the ISTAT organization at all?
In the ISAT
ISTAT, it's the International Safety and Transport Administration?
No, we do not. We work with ICAO, but we do not work with that one.
I think that would probably be something that would be of interest to you.
Sure.
If you want to discuss later.
Absolutely, that's great. I appreciate hearing some more about that.
Sure.
Come on.
Hey, if I've answered all your questions, that is awesome. By the way, I should say, ARSA, as I said, one of the major things ARSA does is the regulatory compliance assistance and guidance. Regrettably, I am not the regulatory guy, but I can certainly, if you have regulatory questions, put you in touch with the people on our team who can answer those. So, but as I said, I really sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be with you all, and please do not hesitate to shoot me an email or give me a call to follow up if you have any questions or anything else I can do. Thank you so much.